So, Jeff, do you remember that really old movie called City Slickers?
Yes.
It won Best Picture.
Yeah.
Well, Curly said, it's the one thing. That's what Paul says today. Paul's talking about the one many things.
Is Paul going to say it with that voice?
Yes.
I hope so.
In my mind.
That's going to be amazing. So he's Chris and I'm Jeff, and we're the Bible guys. That is...
Yeah. During that little commercial roll, we just talked about this. You would love City Slickers, right?
Oh, I loved it. That was,
That's right up your alley.
That's one of those to tear up about it just a little bit.
Yeah.
And
well, it had everything, but it had the outdoor stuff, which you probably loved.
All
that humor.
Yep.
Yeah, that's funny.
It was great. Billy Crystal's always funny anyway, so.
Oh, gosh.
And was it Jack Palance?
Yes.
That's crazy. He's a scary guy.
Yeah, and he won like Best Supporting Actor.
Yeah. It was amazing.
And then during the Oscars, he made fun of the fact that he all of his career he did like serious roles.
Right.
And he does this goofy role and he actually wins something.
Yep.
And then he did push-ups.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, so that was useless information.
Yes.
And but now we're going on to really important stuff. People.
Bible's good.
Well, before we get to the Bible part of it, people really love the dad joke competitions.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
Is it a competition?
Well, it says dad joke competition.
Oh, it
is
does?
what it literally says. It says right on my sheet, the show sheet.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Because Desiree gave it to us
I
that
didn't
way.
realize it was even called that.
Yeah. So there's clear winners and losers in the dad joke competitions, I think. So
Sure.
But we'll let the listeners determine. You going to go first?
Sure, I'll go.
Okay.
All right. I haven't read these yet, so I'm reading these for the first time.
Okay.
The Indian restaurant I work for is so secretive, I had to sign a legal agreement that I wouldn't share the flatbread recipe, just their standard non-disclosure agreement, N-A-A-N.
Okay. I like naan. Naan is good.
Yeah.
That was a long setup for that punchline,
Yeah,
though.
it was.
I'm thinking about starting a diet, but I have too much on my plate right now.
Hey, that's
a good
me.
one.
That's me every day.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. How about this one? What's the worst season to be a free solo rock climber?
I don't know.
Fall.
Oh, no. Free solo rock
You
climber.
couldn't get that? There's only four answers.
I know. I'm sorry. I think I'm in the habit of saying I don't know what.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got this disease where I can't stop making airport puns. The doctor says it's terminal.
Oh, jeez.
I was just in the airport yesterday. Wound up being delayed 2.5 hours for my flight left. It was terrible.
That's terrible.
Yep.
Okay, how about this one? Tesla founder Elon Musk is originally from South Africa, which is strange. You'd think he'd come from Mad at Gas Car.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
That's actually pretty funny.
That's a funny one. Yeah.
Mad at Gas Car. That's really funny.
What do you call a typo on a headstone?
Oh, no.
A grave mistake.
Oh, boo. Boo.
Boo? Is that a boo? Okay.
Hey, what's the best time on a clock?
Oh, no.
It's 6:30, hands down.
For the boys and girls listening, the old clocks used to have hands that you had to actually tell the time rather than just numbers.
That's
okay. What do you call a paper airplane that can't fly? Stationary.
Stationary. That's good. I was going to try to answer it, but you just ripped
no,
off the
I know.
answer.
I didn't want you to guess.
All right. Okay, last joke. My friends all claim that I'm the cheapest person they ever met. I'm not buying it.
Yeah.
That's really funny.
Okay.
That's really good.
Okay, here's my last one. What do you call a person missing 75% of their spine?
I don't know.
A quarterback.
Oh. Oh. That's terrible and awesome. It's terrible and awesome at the same time.
You get it. So he's missing 3/4 of his spine.
Yes,
so
I do
he
get
only
it.
has.
Yes.
Okay.
I could divide. That's terrible.
Do fractions. Okay. Well, that's over, folks. So if
it
you were
is.
trying
It
to figure
is.
out how far you had to skip to get to this part,
It's
the
4
Bible
minutes and
part.
31 seconds.
Exactly.
That's so
Those are
funny.
so funny. I don't know why dad jokes are so funny to me. They bust me up. We were in Roanoke one time. This is where my son and daughter-in-law live. We were sitting in the lobby of a hotel, and I was at a bookstore right before then, and I grabbed an encyclopedia of dad jokes. So we're sitting in the lobby waiting for some of the other people to show up, and we start reading these things. The next thing you know, like tears are just streaming down my face. We're laughing so hard. and a crowd started gathering around us as we're reading.
To hear the dad jokes.
Yeah, to hear the dad jokes. So I think even people who complain about them like them a little
secretly.
bit. Yeah, secretly. It's a secret delight. So we are reading in Ephesians, and we've said this before. It's one of my favorite books. I think you mentioned that too. First 3 chapters is all about what we should believe about Jesus and about how salvation works. And then the next 3 chapters are really about how we're supposed to live out then our faith because of it. So and now we're shifting from the theology side over to the practical side.
And remember that Paul spent more time in Ephesus in that church with these people, almost more than he did with any other church he's ever planted.
Yeah.
So he spent years with them, and so he's writing to a people that he knows very, very well.
Yep. So here's what he says. He says, "Therefore I, a prisoner for serving the Lord, beg you to lead a life worthy of the calling, for you have been called by God. Always be humble and gentle, be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Make every effort to keep yourselves united in the Spirit, binding yourselves together with peace. For there's one body and one Spirit, just as you've been called to one glorious hope for the future. There's one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who's over all, in all, and living through all. However, he has given each one of us a special gift through the generosity of Christ. That is why the Scriptures say, when he ascended to the heights, he led a crowd of captives and gave gifts to his people." Notice that it says he ascended. This clearly means that Christ also descended to our lowly world. And the same one who descended is the one who ascended higher than all the heavens, so that he might fill the entire universe with himself. Now these are the gifts Christ gave to the church: the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, and the pastors and teachers. Their responsibility is to equip God's people to do his work and build up the church, the body of Christ. This will continue until we all come to such unity in our faith and knowledge of God's Son that we will be mature in the Lord, measuring up to the full and complete standard of Christ. Then we will no longer be immature like children. We won't be tossed and blown about by every wind of new teaching. We will not be influenced when people try to trick us with lies so clever they sound like the truth. Instead, we'll speak the truth in love, growing in every way more and more like Christ, who is the head of his body, the church. He makes the whole body fit together perfectly as each part does its own special work. It helps the other parts grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love.
There it is, that one body, right? One Lord, one baptism, that's the curly joke.
Yeah.
Right?
There you go.
And Paul is just, he's covering a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I really want to focus on a few pieces, but what is your first initial reaction?
Well, my first statement is this. For those that have been kind of tracking along with us, for those of you that were part of our Bible Guys Live event, the Heritage Connect or HC Connect night, we talked about this passage. Now, we didn't go into depth on the passage. We dealt with a couple of peripheral things about unity. But so if this sounds familiar to some of you, this is why, right? Because there were hundreds and hundreds of people there.
Yeah, but I'm not going to apologize for repeating stuff because it's the same passage of Scripture.
Yeah, and this is where we're at in this sequence, right? So, I think if you just start at the beginning, here he is. He's writing from prison, which I think is important. Although this version of prison, he's not in a prison or a dungeon like you and I would think. He's
house arrest.
House arrest. He's chained to a soldier. But still, he doesn't have any freedom. And he said, hey, I've been arrested for serving the Lord. And there's persecution has been a part of the Christian church since the very beginning. So if we have somebody who mocks us, we have somebody who harasses us, if we feel like we're suffering a persecution, that's not unique to you. That's a part of Christianity. Jesus said, of course they're going to hate you, right? Because they hated me first.
Right. And he starts the whole chapter off by saying, therefore. In other words, it's connected to, the things that he has laid out beforehand. And he's saying, therefore, by believing these things, by, living this way, lead a life worthy of your calling. And that sort of is a transitional statement, if you look at it that way, into a life of behaving, believing, and putting, things into action. And I love how he is sort of correcting false doctrine because, they struggled with, people coming in and trying to sort of take over the doctrine. There were influencers that embraced Gnosticism, which is a collection of knowledge. Yeah. And so what Paul is saying is like, no, listen, remember the division between Jews and Gentiles. Remember all the different, polytheistic, many God believing type things. That's why he's saying, look, there's one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father over all, is over all, in all, living and through all. And then he quotes, I love this, Psalm chapter 68, and then he actually unpacks Psalm in the Bible. He unpacks the Bible in the Bible.
Yeah, right.
Because he says, let me quote this verse. He says, notice how he said he ascended. So he clearly means that Christ also descended, sort of, supporting the fact that once again, Jesus came from heaven, came to us, and was the living God.
Yeah, this was, and I think I mentioned this before, but this little chunk here, it's tangential. It's not the main idea. He's just like, oh, and by the way, right? Notice this, but it wasn't what he's mainly talking about. But a lot of the book of Colossians, he's kind of taking on that Gnostic idea. One of the Gnostic ideas was that Jesus wasn't fully human, or that he wasn't fully God. One or the other, right? But Orthodox Christians would say that Jesus was fully God and fully human. And so here he's trying to say he was in heaven. That means he's God. Then he came to earth. He was a man. Then he went back to heaven, right? And so he's trying to highlight Jesus' humanity and his deity there. But it's tangential. It's not the main point. The main point of the passage is unity. And so the note here, we always talk about this. We love the Life Application Bible. The note here is, Paul says, there's one body, but unity does not just happen, which is really what he's driving home, the point. We have to work at it. Often differences among people can lead to division, but this should not be true in the church. Instead of concentrating on what divides us, we should remember what unites us. One body, one spirit, one hope, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God. We've learned to appreciate people who are different, or have you learned to appreciate people who are different from you? Can you see how their work and their differing spirits and viewpoints can help the church as they do God's work? Learn to enjoy the way we members of Christ's body complement one another.
You know what that reminds me of is I think it was St. Francis of Assisi who actually said, and I think you can help me on that, who said this, but he said, in the major things we have unity.
Oh, Augustine.
Okay,
Yeah.
Augustus.
Augustine. Yeah,
okay.
St. Augustine.
St. Augustine. So he said, in the main things we have unity, and in the minor things we have liberty, but in all things we have charity. Right. So and that's what it reminds me of. It reminds me of, like, for instance, when people come up to me and they say, "What denomination are you?" I say, "Well, Heritage is a non-denominational church." And they says, "What does that mean?" And I always, and I don't mean this sarcastically or like I just say, well, it just means we follow the Bible.
Right,
Right? It's like we just do our very, very best to follow the Bible. So we're not, associated with like a denomination that says you have to do missions this way, or it's the central belief that this difference in our doctrine, it's not that. A non-denominational church says, hey, we don't ascribe to a denomination. We don't fit into any of those boxes, but we're probably, like a lot of churches that you've been to, but we just follow the Bible. We believe the Bible. Yeah. And, but anyway, all that to say, there are people who come to a non-denominational church that might have a slightly different background, and they might slightly disagree on some points. And I like Augustine when he said, in the major things, we will have unity. Right? The doctrine of salvation, the doctrine of God, the doctrine of the Trinity, the doctrine of sin, the doctrine of angels, the doctrine of man, all those things that, that are just fundamental to our major beliefs, especially of how we get to heaven.
Yeah.
But in the minor things, we have liberty, which means you could disagree with something. It's not going to affect your eternity. You could disagree, and we could still worship side by side.
Sure. Yeah. So Augustine, I believe he wrote in Latin, and it was in the 600s AD.
I was going to quote it in Latin, but then I decided not to.
So the word major and minor can also be translated essentials and non-essentials.
That's right.
Right?
That is right.
So when he's talking about essentials, he's talking about the essentials of the faith. Jesus is the Son of God. He's the virgin-born Son of God. He lived a sinless life. His blood paid the price for our sin. His death, his physical, he took the punishment of our sins in his body. He rose again physically. There's a real heaven, a real earth, and he's going to come back and judge us someday. Right? That's it. Real heaven, real hell. He's going to come back and judge us someday. Those are the major essentials.
Right.
And throughout 2,000 years of Christian history, those have been the core elements of Christianity. Here, this is what Paul's trying to do, is the same thing. He's listing out this list of things that, okay, we can unite around those issues. But he's really driving home the difficulty of unity. It takes a lot of work. That's why he says, as much as possible, right? Do what you can to be unified. Make every effort. to keep yourselves united in the Spirit. The reason why he has to say make every effort is because sometimes we just want to make a half effort, or sometimes we don't want to make any effort. And instead, he's not saying make an effort. Hey, try. That's not what he says. He says make every effort. What he's saying is do every single possible thing you can for peace.
Well, and a lot of us like to say we have unity.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm all for unity. But when the rubber meets the road, it means like, okay, well, what action are you going to put into place to be unified? People are like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I got put in a situation here just recently where somebody was coming at me, wanting me to make a change. And it's not an essential thing. It's a preferential thing. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. And here's why. I'm going to choose, because it was somebody else's decision, not mine. So what they're trying to do is go around somebody and come to the boss, right? And all that kind of stuff. And so I'm like, no, I choose the person who made the decision. So the decision is a different decision than I would make. But I don't need to die on that hill. I don't need to pick that fight. I don't need to minimize them for my preference. It's just a preference. And so I had a long conversation with this person who's come to me complaining and said, listen, sometimes for the sake of unity, when it's not an essential doctrinal issue, it's just a preference, sometimes I have to lay down my preferences in order to make every effort for unity, right? That's it. And man, that stinks because your preferences are correct, aren't they? Aren't your preferences?
To me.
They're the best preferences.
Right.
You've got it all down right. You know exactly the right kind of food to eat. You know the exact things to do for entertainment. You know exactly the limit before you cross over into the wrong behaviors. You know those things. So your preferences are correct. And so are mine. Mine are too. Matter of fact, mine are probably superior to your preferences, right? That's how we think.
Sure.
And so then we want to dig in about goofy things and we're willing to split over it. Let me tell you this story. When I was a youth pastor several years ago, 20-something years ago, there was a church not far from us that the senior pastor came and told us that for 10 years they hadn't seen anybody come to faith in Christ. They hadn't baptized anybody. And he said, let me tell you why. And he's all very emotional about it. He said, we've completely lost our witness. He said, 11 years ago, we had some money set aside. We decided we were going to remodel our building. And he said, so I put together a little committee. He said, 4 women in the church, I got them to put together this committee to redecorate. He said, we were going to pick carpet. We were going to pick what color they had pews, what color pews. We were going to redo all the stained glass. We were going to repaint everything. This is going to be amazing. He said, we had all this money. It's going to be great. He said, but those ladies got in a fight. They started fighting. One lady wanted purple. One lady wanted gold. One lady wanted a green theme. Yeah. One lady wanted a blue theme. Or red, I'm sorry, like a rich red theme, burgundy kind of thing. And he said, they started fighting. He said, but our bylaws, our Constitution demanded that once a committee was done, they had to bring their findings to the people, and the people had to vote over all the findings. Oof. So there was no demand that the committee have a consensus before they came to the people. It was, all right, the committee runs for 3 weeks, then you bring your findings. So these ladies began campaigning for their color. Oh, can you imagine the beautiful gold accents? Can you imagine the beautiful purple stained glass?
I would last in this church -2 minutes.
I know. So it turned into a big fight, and they got a 25% vote for all 4 color schemes. So he said the bylaws didn't leave him any room. He said that's what he did. He said front row, gold. Second row, purple. Third row, green. And the corresponding stained glass window at the end of each aisle matched it. And he said, I'm not lying to you. For 10 years, the people who voted for green only sat in green pews. The people who voted for burgundy only sat in burgundy pews.
This was the church that you were part of?
No. A friend of ours came and told us. He was crying, saying, we have so much division in our church that even over colors. I think that could be the worst thing I've ever heard. So, although the consequences are pretty low, right, in terms of color, like it's not like eternity's at stake. The consequence was division in the church.
That
these people fought over just this. So an old lady dies in the church, and she left money to remodel the church. But in her will, it required that the church had to hire an outside interior decorator. Right. And so he said, thank God it's finally gone. So he came in to tell us the story that they just remodeled. And he said, let me tell you what happened. But he said, isn't that dumb? It's just colors. You know what? Somebody had a strong opinion about purple. And what they did is they totally kneecapped that church for a decade. There was no forward movement in that church at all. And it wasn't because God didn't care about lost people in that county. It was because that church was not unified. They didn't have unity. They didn't make every effort. Nobody was willing to lay down their preferences for somebody else. And I think that's really what he's talking about here.
Yeah.
And then he says, hey, look at all the different parts of the body. You have to understand that different parts have different functions, and celebrate the difference. So we focus on those things that unite us, and we celebrate the differences for the benefit of the body of Christ.
Hey, let me comment on this. Acts chapter 4, verse number 11. He says, now these are the gifts he gave to the church, the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and the teachers. I read a book a long time ago that changed my whole world when it comes to thinking about this particular verse. Because he goes on and says that these gifts were given to the church. These are leadership spiritual gifts, so that the body of Christ might be built up, right? For the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the church. And this book that I read talked about the differences of what those gifts mean, and stated that these gifts were given in order. Whether or not that's true or not, I don't know. But the apostle is the one who knows, or excuse me, he's the one who goes, right? The prophet is the one who knows. The evangelist is the one who recruits. The teacher is the one who explains, and the pastor is the one who cares. And so what we basically said is, like, the apostle is the guy who is the outward. He's the one that should lead the church. The gift of apostleship should be the one always leading the mission, not the one who's the gift of a pastor, because pastor is an entirely different gift. The apostle is a leadership gift that says, hey, we're going to take that city for Christ. He's the one who goes.
Right.
The prophet has discernment from God, and he's the one who knows, or she. And they say, hey, I think God wants to start in that coffee shop right there. Yeah. And once you have a mission and a plan and discernment, then you need an evangelist who recruits, one who just has the gift of winning those for Christ. And then once you have a mission and a plan and discernment, and then you have a whole bunch of people, then you need the inward gifts. Right. And the inward gifts are teacher, pastor, which is one who explains and one who cares for the people in the congregation. And it's amazing to me how the biggest part of that explanation is simply this, that there are inward gifts and there are outward gifts. And the apostle, prophet, evangelist is the one who goes outside the walls of the church, which is exactly what you're talking about, which is like for the purpose of reaching those who are lost in that county or in that area. And then the inward focus gifts are the ones who just focus on feed me, feed me, feed me, care for me, care for me, care for me. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. Right. As long as you have all the gifts present. Right.
Within the church, you need the whole body,
right? With the whole church,
And then he says, so that their job is to equip God's people to do his work, right? So their job is not to do the work of the ministry. Their job is to equip people to do the work of the ministry, to build up the church, which God wants the church to be built up. And this will continue until we all come in such unity in our faith and knowledge of God's Son, that we will be mature in the Lord, measuring up to the full and complete standard of Christ. God's primary goal for the Christians in his church is not just to be happy, not just to be at peace, not just to be comfortable. God's goal is for us to measure up like to Jesus' standard. God's goal is for us to mature and start looking more and more like Jesus. That's his goal. And the job of those spiritual gifted leaders in the church is to equip you to become that, right? So it's exciting. I love that passage. We're going to unpack more of it, living as children of the light, and then we'll start unpacking spiritual gifts over the next several verses.
Hey, before we go, because it's right at that time, I just got to say this. That story of the colored pews is going to stick with me for a very, very long time.
It was shocking. Yeah.
It upsets me so much. because I decided a long time ago, not over pews and colors, but that attitude of disunity and focusing on preferences. I decided a long time ago. In fact, I remember the year that I broke off from, and just went off and said, life is too short, man. I'm not going to spend my life living in church, catering to people's preferences that have no biblical, sort of foundation of like, hey, this is wrong, this is right. Because there's nothing wrong with any of those colors.
Oh, right. Sure.
Yeah. And so I just decided, like, life is too short. I'm not going to spend my life doing that. Right. Because there are lost people in the world.
That's right.
And it's like, let's all get over ourselves and reach some lost people.
That's right.
And it's like, that's what I'm. That's
so
what I'm
lay
about.
Down our preferences for the benefit of unity.
Yes.
Yep. That's great.
So that's a really great place to end. And we will see you hopefully tomorrow on The Bible Guys.